and welcome to a special edition of One-on-One. I'm Rich Wells, the Public Information Officer for the City of Glendale. On April 7th, Glendale residents will be going to the polls to vote for candidates running for city, school, and college offices. In addition to local races, this year's ballot will include Measure U. Measure U has been placed on the ballot by the Glendale City Council in order to update the city's existing utility users tax ordinance. Joining us today to tell us more about Measure U is Glendale Assistant City Manager Bob McFall. Bob, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Good to be here to talk about this very important measure.
Bob, before we talk about the election, why don't you give me a historical perspective on the UUT and Measure U?
The UUT, the Utility Users Tax, is a tax that the City of Glendale has had in place since 1969. This is a tax that's placed on a variety of different utilities, electric, water, gas, and telecommunications. In 1969, it was primarily telephone, of course updated recently to include other forms of telecommunication that are commonly used. This is a tax that's very important to the city, and it's not just the City of Glendale that collects it. This is a tax that is typically collected by most communities in California.
So it's been in place since 1969. What historically has the UUT funded for the city?
The money that's collected from the UUT goes into the city's general fund. So the general fund funds operations such as police and fire, of course, the libraries, parks and recreation, and the various tax-supported types of services that the citizens enjoy.
How much does the city normally collect with the UUT?
Well, of course, each year it changes based upon the amount of usage of the utilities, but this past year, on the overall, we collected a little bit less than $29 million. Of that $29 million, just a bit shy of $9 million was actually on the telecommunications portions of the UUT.
Which brings us to the April 7th election. Can you tell me a little bit about why the City Council felt it necessary to put this measure on the ballot?
No, currently the city collects 7% on the UUT, and there's a variety of issues that have come about that have caused the City Council to consider whether or not it would be appropriate to take this measure back out to the community to be ratified, in essence. Basically, there are a number of changes that have taken place in federal law, and also with the advent of new technologies that have come into place that really the original UUT didn't necessarily anticipate. The City Council determined it would be best that we take this back out to the voters under what are really the tenets of Proposition 218, that any new tax or modifications to taxes should be voted on by the community that will be affected by the taxes. So in this case, while we really feel that the manner in which the City of Glendale has been collecting the UT is appropriate just because of the changes in the nature of the utilities and the utility industry and some of the interpretations of how best to apply this, we felt it was the best approach. We're calling actually a belt suspenders approach to take it back out to the community to have it ratified by the citizens of Glendale.
So I would assume that the City of Glendale is not the only city that's updating its UUT ordinance.
No, Glendale is not the only community to be taking this measure back out to their citizens for a vote. Many communities have already taken their measures back out to their citizens. Most have passed. The cities of Pasadena, Sierra Madre, and other surrounding communities have already taken the measure back to their citizens and had a successful vote.
So Bob, what essentially will Measure U do for the City of Glendale?
Measure U will update the city's existing UUT ordinance to modernize it, make it consistent on what is somewhat of a statewide model that is being used now. Specifically for Glendale, Measure U will lower the rate, the existing utility rate, from 7% to 6.5%. and apply it to existing telecommunications means, and we'll probably talk about exactly what that is in a moment here. It'll actually also add it to a couple of telecommunication means, long distance in essence, that currently aren't taxed.
So, for example, if I'm paying 7% on a cable bill, that cable bill UUT would be reduced to 6.5%. Is that correct?
That's correct, right. Cable television is one of the elements is one of the technologies that's covered by UUT, and that would be reduced from 7% to 6.5%.
And cell phones, I imagine that's also included.
Cell phones is included within that. Some forms of conveyance, T1 lines, some T1 lines would be covered by this.
Now, those services that are not currently taxed or under a UUT, can you give me some examples of that?
Right now, the existing ordinance provides that the UUT will be applied to telecommunications, telephone services that would include local calls and intrastate long-distance calls. The current ordinance does not provide for the UUT to be applied to interstate or international phone calls or an emerging technology, voice over IP. The state model applies the UUT equally to all means of telecommunications. So in Glendale, what that would mean is there would be some additional elements that it would be added to, that being interstate long distance, international long distance, and voice over IP.
Now, would all businesses need to be concerned that they are now going to be taxed for long distance, Bob?
No, not actually. Because first, the City Council made the determination that they want this to be a revenue neutral tax. That's the basis for reducing it from 7% to 6.5%. So even though there is a small amount of telecommunications that will be taxed that currently isn't, the majority of what is currently taxed will actually be reduced 0.5%. So for most businesses, if they are already using some form of a bundled means or some other telecommunication or long distance service, it's very possible that they're actually already paying the 7% on that total bundled service. What they would actually see is a reduction in their bill from 7% to 6.5%.
So, Bob, it really depends on what plan a business may have, correct?
Yes, you're right. It does depend on which plan they have. If a business or even a resident currently has a bundled plan, it's likely they're already paying the 7% UUT on the entire plan, including the long distance portion. If they have a plan that has out-of-state and international separately, then what they would experience would be a reduction on one part of their bill, that of the interstate and their local calls. They see a reduction in that part of their bill, and they'd see an increase on the out-of-state and international calls.
Well, Bob, I want to talk a little bit more about the UUT, which is going to be on the April 7th ballot. We're going to take a break first, though. We'll be back with more one-on-one right after this.
Parents, have you explained traffic signs and signals to your children? Do your children know safe and unsafe places to walk? Do your children know what they should do while riding a bicycle, a skateboard, or a scooter? If you answered no to any of these questions, you may want to discuss pedestrian safety issues with your children. Please, don't take any chances.
I'm Glendale Police Chief Randy Adams. When you're crossing the street, please remember these 3 steps. Wait, watch, and walk. And please walk defensively. It may save your life.
Hi, and welcome back to One-on-One. Today we're talking with Bob McFall, the Assistant City Manager for the City of Glendale. Bob's talking about Measure U, which is going to be on the April 7th municipal ballot. Bob, some people have claimed that the city is simply putting this measure on the ballot this year to collect more revenue. Is that true?
No, that's absolutely not true. In fact, there's been a lot of effort went into establishing what the formula would be, in essence reducing it from 7% to 6.5% to ensure that this will remain a revenue neutral measure. That was the intent of the City Council, and the intent of the ordinance was to remain revenue neutral, not use it to collect additional revenue.
And so revenue neutral simply means that the money you will be collecting, if the Measure U passes, will be very similar to what you're collecting right now.
That's correct. And that's what the intent is. By reducing the majority of what's being collected by 0.5% while applying it to a couple of additional aspects of telecommunication, our anticipation is, and the experience of other communities has been, it remains in essence the same as what's currently being collected.
Now, Bob, will the community have an opportunity to see how this money is being collected?
Yes, the measure includes an auditing provision. So the manner in which the money is being collected, how it is being applied to different telecommunications elements, different aspects of the bill, will all be audited and available to the public for review.
Bob, so much of what we do today is related to the internet. Will Measure U cause us to tax the internet?
No, Measure U does not add any element or any aspect to it at all that taxes the internet.
So Bob, for example, if I wanted to download some ringtones on the internet, that will not be taxed?
That's correct. Ringtones would not be taxed. In fact, no downloads, movies, TV programs, books that are downloaded, none of those would be taxed under the provisions of the UUT.
Now, currently qualified low-income people can get an exemption from the UUT on their utility bills. Will that still be in place under Measure U?
Yes, low-income residents would continue to qualify to be exempt from the UUT at the same level that it has previously been, and in fact qualifying disabled individuals are also exempt from the UUT.
Now, Bob, what happens if Measure U is defeated by the voters?
If the voters don't pass Measure U, then the City of Glendale would continue to collect the utility users tax at the 7% level that it traditionally has collected it at. It would mean that some services, out-of-state, long-distance calls, wouldn't have the utility users tax applied to it, and there wouldn't be a reduction on the balance of the bill.
So I would continue to pay 7% on my cable bill, my cell phone, things of that nature?
That's correct, yes. Right.
Bob, are there any other concerns if Measure U doesn't pass?
Yes, there is one other primary concern. There are other communities who have not modified their UUT ordinance in a timely manner, and they have not taken it to their voters and had it reapproved. Those communities have been subject to legal challenge. Their UUT ordinances have been subject to legal challenge. We don't know what the outcome of those legal challenges are going to be. What most communities have done, just as the City of Glendale is attempting to do now, is to take this modified ordinance, the contemporary ordinance, to its citizens and have it affirmed by them. That simply removes all threat of a legal challenge for this community, and that we would be able to continue to receive the same level of revenue that supports the general fund services, such as fire and police and parks and recreation and libraries, that we have traditionally received. Nothing more from it, but nothing less from it.
Bob, if people want more information on Measure U, I understand that the city clerk has put together a new website, glendalevotes.org, and it has a lot of information not only on Measure U, but also about a lot of the candidates running for office this year.
Yes, that's right, Rich. Any of our citizens can log either onto the city's website and click onto a link that will take them to additional information on the utility users tax, or they can log directly onto glendalevotes.org. They can also contact the city manager's office at 818-548-4844, and there's a number of staff people that could provide additional information on this important measure.
Bob, I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and I'm sure a lot of folks out there now better understand Measure U, and of course we would encourage everyone to go out and vote on April 7th.
It was a pleasure to be here. We hope the whole community comes out and votes in this important election.
And thank you for joining us for another edition of One on One.